The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
The Timberwolves win over the OKC Thunder on Thursday night.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast.
The Wolves played great. I already kind of set this up. I mean, missing 3 regular starters. I mean, you could go DiVincenzo, Gobert, and Julius Randle. You're also missing Mike Conley. So that's 4 of your top 7 rotation guys, 4 of your top 8 rotation guys. And Jalen Clark gets his first career start a night after not playing all that well. On Wednesday against Milwaukee. He struggled offensively in this game too, but he was great defensively. We'll get into that, but that was notable. Chris Finch also notable here off the top. Kind of, so even with the short bench, he played an 8-man rotation, and he actually gave Josh Minott 2 rotation minutes too. It was end of the third quarter when this was still it remained a relatively close game for the whole thing. I shouldn't say that. The Wolves never completely got up by 20 plus, and it never felt over until it finally was, although the Thunder never had a lead. All that to say, Minott played a couple of rotation minutes. Finch played Terrence Shannon 29 minutes off the bench. Luka Garza played 15 minutes, most of which was not garbage time, and played well. So there's really a lot to talk about in this one. What stands out the most, and that's where I'll start, was the tone the Wolves set in the first quarter. And that's extra notable because it's been such an issue for the Wolves this season. I mean, just the night prior against Milwaukee, they came out flat and they ended flat. That's often been the problem. It's the middle stages. There were times the last couple of seasons where the third quarter, remember for a while, the Wolves were like the worst third quarter team in the league. I think it was the year before last. And, there were all these questions about Finch and adjustments at halftime and all this stuff, because there's always questions about Chris Finch, despite the fact he's, the most successful Wolves coach this side of Flip Saunders during the Kevin Garnett years. But the first quarter and the fourth quarter have been the problems this year. Coming out flat, not playing physical, not playing active early, missing a bunch of open shots. That's what happened against Milwaukee. And then closing games, which sometimes you could point at the coaches for execution, but a lot of times it's the players failing to execute in the fourth quarter. And that's been a problem. Well, guess what? Those were the best quarters for the Wolves in this game. They came out super physical, super aggressive, super active in the first quarter. And I could, unfortunately, probably count on at least my hands and feet, my fingers and toes, how many times that's happened this year, 56 games in. The Wolves just come out flat far too often. That was not the case in this one. They took the fight to OKC. They beat the Thunder at their own game, which is physicality, activity, length, athleticism, playing with energy. Something the Wolves did to teams all over last year. I mean, look at what they did to Denver at times in that series. Look what they did to Phoenix in the first round. Look what they did on the way to 56 regular season wins a year ago. And too often this year, the Wolves have come out too cool for school. They've come out flat offensively, and they aren't able, because they're playing too cool for school and the energy is not there. They're not able to make up for the flat offense and, frankly, flat jump shooting with the defense, because the defense isn't doing anything to write home about either. At least not to the level where you can paper over or I don't know, cover up some of what you're messing up on the offensive side. And to be clear, big picture, the offense and the defense are pretty good. This is still a team that's 6 above 500, but I'm talking about the first quarter specifically. And the Wolves were very physical against a very physical Thunder team. I mean, Isaiah Hartenstein's a physical player. He's a good player, and he's a physical player. SGA plays physical. Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, these guys play extremely physical. And the Wolves did not get out physical. I thought starting Jalen Clark and putting him on SGA right out of the gate was a really smart decision by the coaching staff. And SGA got his. I mean, he still got to the line 11 times. He only turned it over once. He got 9 assists. He scored 24 points. But guess what? Took him 21 shots to get 24 points. He only squeezed the trigger twice on threes. And he was actually a minus 12 in this game. The worst mark of any Thunder starter. Jalen Clark did an outstanding job on SGA. And I thought he was at times slightly out of position against Milwaukee. The game before that, Monday night in the loss to Cleveland, I thought he struggled a little bit too. I wanted him to be better against the Cavs dynamic backcourt. But this Jalen Clark looked a lot like the one we saw going back to last week, go back to Saturday and a full week ago, middle of last week. He was physical. He was in SGA's jersey. The technique he used, he was very physical on the perimeter. But what's the book on SGA? He's going to, get you on your heels, and then he's going to pull up somewhere in the mid-range or close to the rim, draw the foul, and try and get an and one. And Jalen Clark was physical up until the point where it was clear what SGA was going to try and do. And he literally, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm pulling back from the microphone, right? He would pull back, not get caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He would go straight up, put his hands up so it's clear he wasn't reaching, he wasn't fouling. And SGA still almost made a bunch of shots because he's a really good player. I'm not at all taking anything away from SGA. But the shot becomes tougher when you're anticipating the contact and it doesn't come. And there were a couple SGA shots he banked hard that rimmed out because he shot them so hard. And that's typically what happens when you're expecting the contact that isn't there. It was just such intelligent defense from Jalen Clark and executed really perfectly. If you can make SGA shoot 6 of 21 from the field and only make 1 3 and that's great. That's the recipe to beat the OKC Thunder, because then somebody else has to beat you. And J-Dub only had, he shot 8 of 17 and nobody else had more than 14 points. I mean, Chet Holmgren only had 11 points on 7 shots. It's another area the Wolves were really good. And side note, I'm curious to see how Chet and Hartenstein play together long term. This is only a small handful of games now that they've both been healthy and on the floor together. Fascinated to see what that looks like for them. I'm not saying that they're worse with them on the floor. I'm not at all saying that. I'm just interested to see. The Wolves aren't the only team that's had a learning curve with bigs, right? It's not a Wolves specific issue. To see how they function with those guys on the floor together is going to be absolutely interesting. And the Thunder don't have a whole lot of big man depth beyond that. They're happy to play small. And in this game, in part because of the Wolves' injury issues and also because of the way the Thunder play, the Wolves actually went to Luka Garza for 12, 13 rotation minutes in this game. But all that to say, having Jalen Clark guard SGA was awesome. He did a great job shadowing him, being physical where he could, and then avoiding getting his hand caught in the cookie jar as much as possible. And yeah, SGA still got to the line 11 times, but I thought that was really, really impressive. The Timberwolves did a great job on SGA. That's point number one. Well, actually, point number one is the physicality overall they played with defensively. And an extension of that, moving past, and actually, I mean, the SGA thing is part of it because of how Jalen Clark and others, Jaden did a good job when he was on him. They blitzed him a bunch too, to be clear. And the Wolves also mixed in quite a bit of zone in this game, which I thought was super smart. I mean, there's guys on OKC that can shoot threes, but that's not how they're going to beat you, right? They're going to beat you. It's a little bit, again, like last year's Minnesota team, where the Wolves could beat you by shooting threes. They ended up actually shooting the best percentage in the league from outside the arc, but their 3-point rate wasn't insane. OKC's middle of the pack in terms of 3-point rate. They're middle of the pack in terms of percentage. They're not going to crush you from outside the arc. I mentioned Shea only made 1 3. He averages 2 makes on 6 attempts for the season. He's 36%. That's pretty good. So if you can limit him to 2 attempts and 1 make, you'll take that, right? Lou Dort's a 41% 3-point shooter on 5.5 attempts per game. And the Wolves, I mean, he was 2 of 6 in this game. So below what he would average. He averages, or at least in terms of, slightly below what he averages in terms of makes per game. You could go on down the list. The Wolves did a good job of limiting the 3-point line for SGA and for the Thunder more broadly. But the zone was obviously not to allow SGA to shoot threes, but let's make some of these other guys beat us. And I think they mixed it in just the right amount. Isaiah Joe's another good example. He shoots over 40%. He was 0 for 4. So there was some good fortune there. But by mixing up their coverages, by blitzing SGA, by mixing in some zone, the Wolves did enough to keep the Thunder off balance. I mean, this is a really good OKC offense. It's a top 5 offense league wide, and they only scored 101 points, 42% shooting, and 24% on threes in this game. The other thing I want to talk about related to physicality is the rebounding. Minnesota had 20 offensive rebounds in this game. Look no further than my show on Wednesday. Go back and listen to Wednesday's Locked On Wolves. I did a whole show on the Timberwolves shift in offense and the importance of offensive rebounding with this suddenly new look Timberwolves team. And even without Rudy Gobert, who's been an offensive rebound machine over the last couple of weeks, the Timberwolves had 20 offensive rebounds. Naz Reid had 4. Luka Garza had 6 in 15 minutes. And Terrence Shannon had 3 in 29 minutes coming out of the backcourt. We talked about Jalen Clark being a good rebounding guard. He had 2 offensive rebounds in 24 minutes. He's had more offensive rebounds than defensive rebounds, I think, in every game he's played so far. The ability and the willingness to get in there and rebound and generate additional offensive opportunities was a massive reason that the Wolves won this game, because they didn't shoot the ball well either from outside the arc. OKC was 7 of 29. That's 24%. Guess what? The Wolves shot 17 more threes. They shot 46 threes. They only made 5 more threes than OKC. The Wolves were 26.1% on three-point attempts in this game. Naz was just 3 of 9. Ant was just 3 of 12. Jalen Clark was 0 for 4 after, I think, an 0 for outside the arc the night before. Terrence Shannon was actually only 1 for 4. They struggled shooting threes, but they won this game because they attempted 11 more shots than Oklahoma City, in large part due to their 8 more offensive rebounds. And that then segues into my next point, which is the lack of turnovers. Minnesota only turned the ball over 10 times in this game, which is the same number that OKC turned it over. Okay? The last time these two teams played, go back to New Year's Eve, Minnesota actually only lost by 8 at OKC. In that game, Minnesota actually outshot OKC outside the arc. They were 40% outside the arc. The Wolves actually out offensive rebound OKC. They had 10 offensive rebounds. OKC only had 9. They were perfect from the free throw line, although they didn't get to the line very often. But the reason why the Wolves lost that game by 8 was because they turned it over 24 times and gave up 31 points off of turnovers in an 8-point loss. If you cut those turnovers in half, it's a win. I know it's not quite that simple. But think about that. 24 turnovers, twice as many turnovers as OKC, and also giving up 31 points on 24 turnovers is crazy. That's basically like 1.3 points per possession. And that's not a palatable number. It's an outlier if you look at the season. So this is a topic for another day. I actually don't hate the way the Wolves match up with OKC. Healthy, injured, whatever. They beat themselves. And to be very clear, I feel like I need to say this in case any Thunder fans are listening. OKC's great. They're the best team in the NBA. I'm not saying that they're not. But there are teams that are better and worse matchups for each other. Like the Mavs last year were a terrible matchup for the Timberwolves. OKC's not a bad matchup for Minnesota.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on ticket. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, Kylan, this is one entering the All-Star break that the Golden State Warriors just needed. I mean, they needed it for their morale. This was the difference between below 500 and above 500 entering the All-Star break. You had to get one for your psyche. Back-to-back, though, you figured maybe entering the game we wouldn't see a ton of Steph Curry. We see plenty of him. 35 minutes, he goes 7 of 17 from the floor, 5 of 13 from deep. He leads the way with 27. Jimmy Butler, once again, awesome. 19, 8, and 4. Draymond with 13, 8, and 4 was great. And I thought Brandon Bajemski was excellent. 7 of 17 with 18 points in the game. Well, let's kind of weave through how this thing went, Kylan, because the Warriors got off to a good start. The Rockets were able to get back into it. Let's start with the only negative of the day, and that's the Warriors almost blowing a 22-point lead in this game. When it went wrong for the Warriors, what did you think it was that wasn't working?
The turnovers. I just think the Warriors got a little bit sloppy with the basketball there during that stretch. And then I think you also have to give the Houston Rockets a ton of credit. This is a really good team for a reason. I don't think they played well in the first half. I thought they got things together in the third quarter. They showed exactly what they could do when they brought some energy. They brought some intensity. I thought it seemed like they got the Warriors out of a rhythm. They were a little bit frenetic, and then Houston started scoring the basketball. And this time around, the Warriors were able to weather the storm, which is huge. I do think that it was great to see the Warriors veterans playing on the second night of a back-to-back. And it just goes to show how important the momentum is from this game going into the All-Star break. They knew they needed a dub. They needed to go in with that positive momentum. They needed to take that confidence into the break so you can relax a little bit and enjoy versus going off on a loss. So I do think that it was a positive sign that Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler, and Steph Curry played on the back half of a back-to-back on the road. Now, granted, Houston and Dallas aren't too far apart, so that was some positive news. But to play on the second half of a back-to-back, I thought was a positive sign. I think we need to see more of that down the stretch because every single game matters for a Warriors team that is in that 6-12 range, which is very tight right now in the Western Conference. 10th place coming into the day. Every single game here on out matters for the Warriors. I don't think you can afford to be sitting on the bench. I don't think you can afford to be taking nights off and rest games and all those types of things. Everyone's going to have to be a full go here down the stretch within reason, or at least able to avoid injury. So I think that was awesome. And I just think it was great the way the Warriors weathered the storm, which has not been the case all season long. The third and fourth quarter collapses have been so frustrating. So the fact that they were able to hold them off, close them out down the stretch. Draymond Green, Charlie, hits a massive three in the closing minutes, or like under 2 minutes, a minute to play, to ice the game. I did not have that on the bingo card. I don't know about you.
No, and that was right after the egregious Steph Curry turnover. And really the only negative of
turnovers.
The only negative of Curry's day, I mean, he was awesome once again for the Warriors. Failed to hit that 30-point mark with just 27. But since the arrival of Jimmy Butler, I mean, he's been 25 plus every single night. He has been giving it to you. How the game ended, though, Kylan, I thought was very interesting because the Rockets kept making their pushes. I think they got it down as close as one. I think it was one. They got it all the way down to one late in the game. Warriors kept responding. They're up like 7, and we saw some just awesome plays from the Warriors. First, there was the give and go. Butler to Draymond, back to Butler. They've been running that play since the Stone Ages. And that just is another wrinkle, another element that Jimmy Butler gives you. He's so good without the basketball in his hands. And from someone that, when I used to play hoop back in the day, I don't know about your game, Kylan, but it's hard to play off the basketball. Like the natural instinct is just to play around the perimeter, get the ball, and with it in your hands, try to make something happen. Jimmy Butler is the exact opposite, to where he just will demand it on the post. He'll make plays happen with screens. He'll make plays happen getting offensive rebounds. And tonight we saw him knock down his first three-pointer in a Golden State Warriors uniform. Now, it was wide open. If it was off I think a Draymond drive and kick. Maybe come playoff time, we will see Jimmy Butler creating for himself from deep. But as of right now, in order for him to shoot it, he's got to be wide open. That's just the way he plays. But, man, I love Jimmy's cuts. Just respect the way that he plays and how he can make things happen without the ball in his hands. This is the first time you've gotten to come on the show and break down Butler's addition. What did you see today that continues to the aura that Jimmy Butler brings to this squad?
I love what Jimmy Butler brings to this squad because it's something different. Jimmy Butler brings something the Warriors don't have. His ability to attack the basket, his aggression to drive, and his ability to finish in the paint is elite. He can post up defenders. He can take advantage of size mismatches when he gets a smaller defender on him. He can beat you up down low. And then again, he's just aggressive and crafty and finishing around the basket. And then Jimmy Butler just brings a certain level of grit to his game. You see his ability to get it done on the glass. You see his ability to force turnovers and just be disruptive defensively. He's scrappy at chasing down loose balls. I just like the heart, the hustle. There's just a little bit of a oomph that Jimmy Butler brings and a toughness that I think this Warriors team desperately needed. In addition to the fact that he's so dangerous at finishing in the paint, and the Warriors also desperately need that to complement the outside shooting. That's one of the big issues that I've had with the Warriors, not just this season, last season, but beyond, is the fact that you live and die by the three ball. When the three isn't falling, it becomes very difficult to find other ways to score and other ways to win. Now, when you have Klay Thompson and Steph Curry at the top of their game, and they're the two best three-point shooters in the NBA, you can overcome that on a regular basis. You can maybe afford to live and die by the three. The fact of the matter is that's no longer the case. Buddy Hield is slumping. He's been atrocious. You do have Steph Curry who can still knock down the three. He's not hitting at the most efficient clip of his career. So you need more balance in your scoring. And the Warriors don't have an interior scorer in a post player. They've got Kevon Looney coming in off the bench. They've got Draymond Green playing the small ball five. And yes, he hit that critical three, but he's not a player who is, going to be a bucket down low if you feed him the ball inside. So that means they need someone to force the defense to collapse and to provide a different way to score. And that's what Jimmy Butler brings. You just see the gravity he has when he's cutting, when he has the basketball, when he puts it down on the floor. You see multiple guys coming to help, and that opens up space on the outside for the Warriors shooters. It allows more guys around him to get open. It provides more space for Steph. And I just think that it's a great addition and marriage to what the Warriors already have going. I think that Jimmy Butler has elevated what the Dubs do. I think he's an upgrade from Andrew Wiggins. Of course, appreciate everything Andrew Wiggins did and not to try to knock him, but I just think that Jimmy Butler brings a different level of toughness and interior scoring that really, really is going to help the Warriors as a whole take some pressure off Steph. And again, just open up space because of the gravity that he brings with the basketball and his ability to finish inside. I thought he was great. I think that he still probably needs some more time because, as everyone knows, he was sitting out with the Miami Heat. There was all the drama that went down. It's something that Steph talked about in his post-game interview is, just giving him more time to get in game shape. So that's the thing. The best is yet to come. I love the addition of Jimmy Butler. I don't love that he's old. That's my one caveat in this whole thing of him signing an extension.
We'll worry about that when that day comes. As long as he's playing 35.
We'll worry about that. We'll worry about that another day. For today, I'm happy. I like the fit.
For today, we celebrate. And it goes beyond the stat sheet when you compare Butler to Wiggins, because it's just a point here and a rebound and an assist there. But you see the effect when he's actually on the team you're covering every single night as compared to just following him loosely. You see just it's the it factor. Like Steve Kerr didn't even know how to describe it. He's just like, he's got it. He's got it.
Toughness. I'm telling you, it's grit. It's toughness. It's edge. It's scrappiness, you said to me when we were watching.
You know what else it is? It's when it becomes an 8-point game with like 4 minutes left and the Warriors feel like they're leaking oil. He gets to the free throw line. He saves you. I mean, that's what he does. He got to the line 6 times. He hit all 6, and they seemed like they came at crucial points where it just slowed down the game and allowed the Warriors to get into their half-court set. We got a ton to talk about with this game, Kylan. The Warriors' defense as a whole.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps me engaged every moment, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. How about some college basketball action, like a monster Saturday night matchup, 1 versus 2? The Iron Bowl, except basketball. It's Alabama. It's Auburn. Auburn, actually a slight underdog despite being the higher ranked team in the AP poll. FanDuel has Alabama favored by 1.5 right now. In FanDuel, customers, new ones anyway, can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your shot at 150 smackaroonies in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
CJ McCollum just showed you why the Pelicans didn't trade him.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast.
So let's get into this one because the hero of the game is CJ McCollum. He straight up carried this team. In the first half of this game, it looked like this second half was going to be pretty awful. Looked like it was going to be pretty rough. In the second quarter, no Zion Williamson playing because it's the second night of a back-to-back. The Pelicans offense vanished. The Sacramento Kings went on a 15-0 run and took full control of this game as New Orleans didn't score a point for over 4 minutes. And then CJ McCollum in the third quarter said, nah, enough with that. Actually, he swore. He swore on the broadcast after the game, which was kind of funny. He said, I need to be more aggressive. And oh boy, did he ever mean it and go out and do it. CJ McCollum carried the Pelicans 19 points in the third quarter. He had 6 points at halftime. He finished with 37 in the second half in overtime. You could argue that CJ McCollum by himself ended the Pelicans' losing streak. It was an insanely impressive performance. It's an insanely impressive performance given that this is someone who's in his mid-30s on the second night of a back-to-back playing heavy minutes to try and go and get a win when the Pelicans don't necessarily need it. And CJ goes, you know what? I'm going to go all out. I'm going to do whatever I can to get this win because players don't want to tank. Players don't try to tank either. They want to win games. At age 33, in the second night of back-to-back playing heavy minutes, he put up 41 minutes, 43 points in this. He played basically like 80 minutes over the past 2 games, 2 nights. And this is what he went out and did. And if you're like, wait, no, we want to lose games, we want to tank. One game here and there is not going to matter at all in the grand scheme of it. They are right now solidly in the top 5. When it comes to it, really the top 4. One win isn't actively going to hurt them. Now New Orleans is 1-9 in their last 10 games. That is literally the worst mark over the last 10 for any NBA team. They're going to be just fine. Or they're tied with Charlotte, who's also 1 of 9. They're going to be just fine when it comes to tanking here. But this is a game that shows you why the Pelicans didn't trade CJ McCollum. And there's 2 reasons for this, and they're going to sound kind of contradictory, right? One, they didn't trade him because they want to be competitive next year, and CJ McCollum is still a good basketball player, can still go and do things that he did. He was closing it out in the third and fourth quarter and overtime. 43 points on 16 of 25 shooting, 7 of 12 from 3, 4 of 6 from the line, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and just 2 turnovers on insanely high usage. That is a masterclass performance. If you want to try and win games, you need good basketball players. Him realizing he wasn't playing well and then deciding he was going to take over and then doing that, I dig that. That's going to help you win games next year. Now, you might be saying, where was this CJ McCollum last night when they lost? And does he fit next to Zion in a sense? Can he take 25 shots per game? Does he need to have that to have this kind of impact? And it's somewhat of a valid question, but here's the thing. There's 2 sides to that too. One, you banking on Zion playing every single game next year? You're going to see games where he just doesn't play? Look, I think, he's doing all the right things. They're saying all the right things. He could have played tonight. There's just no reason to have him play. But you think he's going to play every game next season? Or are you going to have nights where you're trying to be competitive and you need scoring and Zion's not playing? And CJ McCollum showed that he can do that. And if he doesn't have a ton of value around the league, and with that $33 million contract, it was tough to trade him and no team was just going to take that on. You go and you keep him and you try and be competitive next year. Now, I think it still is up for debate if they should blow it up or not, and if they will or not. So we'll see what happens with that a little bit in the future. But this is why you don't trade him. It's a little bit of insurance for Zion Williamson. And his game is very complimentary for Zion Williamson. He knew what he needed to do in this game, but when he's playing next to Zion, and when Zion was playing like he did in that game the other night, yeah, you don't need CJ doing this. So it's not that he's necessarily streaky. It's he knows his role a little bit here too. And I think that was absolutely a factor into the type of performance that you get from him. Zion was rolling. Zion was doing this. I don't think CJ was going to be taking the shots from him. He's been pretty good about that, which means given that your kind of 2 main usage guys right now are Zion Williamson and Trey Murphy, and we'll talk about him extensively in the next segment because kind of a weird but also good game from Trey. I don't really know how I feel about it. CJ is the type of guy that will know what to do next year, and then he is an expiring deal. There's talk of potentially extending him too. something to kind of keep in mind there with all of that. But I think if they want to be competitive, having more talent on the team, and CJ is still talented, is definitely going to do it. He had a very, very good year last year. He's starting to get back into form this year too, and you're seeing him play better and better, and that's what you need to see from him right now. And he definitely delivered in this game. Look, getting a couple wins here and there, even if we want them to tank, even if we know that's the correct move for them to do, is still kind of fun. And to go out on a 1-game winning streak versus an 11-game losing streak just makes you feel better as you hit the All-Star break and have this game. And I don't know, sometimes you just need good feels, good vibes, and it was definitely in this one. It's also loud in the Smoothie King Center. Not the best attended game. You wouldn't have known that. It was loud. When it comes to the Kings, I think I don't know if there's like a rivalry developing. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, given last year, 6-0 against them. But it's fun playing them, and these two teams really get up for it. CJ was like chirping at their bench in that third quarter, in that fourth quarter. Now, the Pelicans almost blew it. Giving up, playing the foul game at the end, up 3. You had Domantas Sabonis hit that one free throw and then missed the second. They grabbed an offensive board, hit the shot, which allowed him to tie it, or hit free throws, which allowed him to tie it. And then the Pelicans missed the game-winning. Good look from CJ at the end here. They almost tanked incredibly well. Didn't in this one, got the win. I'm cool with it. It's fun to get wins. That's why we're here. And seeing good performances, standout performances like that from CJ McCollum and other players is pretty great.